Good morning to everyone. This is an exciting moment for me to just sit back and reflect on my pitch journey because that's what it has become. So 2 years ago, as most of you know, I was the executive director of SAFAIDS. And I had a very strong relationship at the time with the AIDS Funds program. We had been working together on other projects. When they approached me and introduced me to the pitch program, I found the objectives of the program were very much aligned to the work that we were doing. And so I was very excited, and in my very normal quick form, for those who know me, I like making decisions very quickly. I just said, yes, I think this is something that we want to be involved in. And yes, let's talk about what does that mean? So we had two conversations. One was for SAFAIDS to become a partner in the program, but the other one was also for SAFAIDS to host the project coordinator. In the end, we took both roles. But I must say at the time, you can imagine we were talking about Zimbabwe, so all I could...
Falar de Zimbábue, o que eu posso dizer é
small part of the pie, and that is what I was preoccupied with. And when the program started, it moved quite quickly, and the partners came together in Zimbabwe, and they started working together, particularly around advocacy. And I remember one landmark case just before I left that the pitch team was engaged or participated in was we had a private school, a teacher in a private school came out openly to say he was gay in a parents teachers meeting. And you can imagine it caused such a huge, it became a national issue because first of all, the parents, very affluent parents, immediately wanted the teacher dismissed. The other parents rushed to the school to check if their kids had not been abused by this teacher, and there was such debate around, should the teacher have even spoken about this in a school setup? Why was he telling school kids that he is gay? Is this his way of advertising himself? It was such a big issue that divided the country. And I was excited because the pitch partners in Zimbabwe came together and took the case and really started running with the case. Eventually, I wish we had a success story, but the success part of that story is, of course, people talked about gay people, which was usually an undiscussable issue. So that gave us an opportunity to speak openly. It was in the news, it was in the paper. So on that part, we could say that was a gain. Eventually, I think the teacher left because the pressure was just too much from everywhere, which was sad because we wanted the teacher to stay. But I think for him, the pressure was just too much. But that was my first glimpse of what a collaboration of partners in a country could do effectively. And so when I left SAFAIDS to join Frontline AIDS, I left with that memory in my mind. And my last meeting with Mark, the director of AIDS Funds, just before I left SAFAIDS was, we will see you on the other side when we meet at the pitch board, because you are obviously going to be on the pitch board given your new role in Frontline AIDS. And that's what happened. I got to Frontline AIDS and it was like opening an umbrella, and suddenly I could see this program in its massive size and how much and the potential of the work that it was doing around the world. And I just got so excited. And, many of you know, for me, the question is always, what difference are we making for the person on the ground, for that woman in my village, for that gay man in my village? Because that's where I want to see the change. And what I liked about the pitch program is it was about people, and it was about transforming lives. and I just got excited. I was also very lucky to work with a very competent lead manager for this program on Frontline AIDS side, who is Lucas. You all know Lucas is solid. He crosses the T's and the dots. So my life was very easy. It was just really, I wasn't even supervising. It was just really getting to know what the program was doing. And yeah, it was such a great opportunity, which we don't normally get in many, many parts of our lives.
Thank you. Thanks, Lois. I mean, it's a really cool program because of its global nature and the international different aspects. And we see that today on the call. What are the aspects of it that really surprise you and that you feel are the ones we want to, that inspire us to continue to build on them?
The community-led advocacy. I am a strong believer in that change can only happen at the community level. And change needs to be driven by the community because they are the ones who know their problems. We cannot parachute into communities and think we can make a difference. We can only get into a community and catalyze. And we catalyze by giving knowledge, we catalyze by giving resources. And that's what this program did. It literally just gave the community organizations what they needed and allowed them to do the processes in the way that they know best. It was not a prescriptive program. So because of that, when you look at the results, you can really see the minute changes that were taking place at the community level, that were community driven. And once the civil society organizations in the program became strong advocates, they just took it and ran with it. And changes started just blowing and mushrooming everywhere. And for me, that's what a development program should do. That is real development, when you empower communities to look back and say, yeah, that's our program, we did it. Even as we sit here today talking about an end of program, for me, it's not an end of program because the communities that you are living skills, they are never going to stop what they were doing because the skills don't go away because the project has come to an end. The project is ending for us, the planners and the designers and the holders of money. But for the beneficiaries, the program has become part of their lives. And I think that is what should give us the comfort and satisfaction to know that we all did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, Lois. So true. We've a minute or so left. Are there any final words of encouragement you want to give us?
One of the things I want to talk about is the collaborative outcomes of this program. The program is a global program. It brought together people from all different places. They came together to move towards one vision. And the ultimate vision is to end AIDS. And you all know we have not ended AIDS. So the end of the PEACH program does not mean the end of AIDS. So, and the linkages and relationships that we build during this program should continue whether we have money or we have no money. Often, we have always been misled to think that if there's no money, it means end of relationships. That is not true. We do not need money to do what we are doing today. This webinar costs next to a song. And I think the fact that we have a Joe here who manages partnerships for us is an indication that we want this to continue. We want this relationship to continue one way or the other, because there's a lot we can still do together. We can still share information. we can share knowledge, we can share products and tools that we will be developing even beyond this program. Because like many of you, this program was not a unique program sitting in a vacuum. This program was part of all the programs that you are implementing every day. And I know from experience of having been on the ground that all we do is we take the products from one program and we marry them into another program, and we use that to leverage to look for more money. That's what we do. And I think many of you are already doing that. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that. On our part as Frontline, I would like, through Joe, I hope that many of you will continue to want to be part of us so that we can work in another form and format. And we can continue to do development differently, because that's the new challenge. We want to do development differently. And what does that mean? It means it's about how we connect. It's about the power sharing, who sits with what. And that is what we are looking at dismantling. Whether you're a global organization or you're a grassroots organization, everybody brings something to the table to complete the puzzle. And therefore, everybody must have the power of the voice. And we hope, I want to leave to Joe because I know he's going to talk a bit more about that later. So let me end by really congratulating yourselves, ourselves, everyone who was part of this program, because this is one program, when I look back, I am so proud, really so proud. You know, I saw in the evaluation, we collected, you know, the harvest collection of results. We collected 117 positive results from this program. That's incredible. That's how much this program did. And I don't want us to lose even one of those. So let's continue looking at how we can collaborate, how we can work together to preserve what we achieved through this program, and even scale it out and scale it up.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Lois. Thanks so much for getting it started. So, and I think also you really spell out it's got to be, all our work that we do has to be led by the communities. The power is when we bring the communities together into a more global platform where we can share and learn together. And let's just keep working together. The power comes in our collaboration and that knowledge and solidarity together. So thank you so much for getting us started today. I should remind people, you might have seen that we're recording. So just to let you know, it is being recorded, and we've got people joining all the time. We're up to about 80 people now. So if you've just come in, sit back, the moment to be perfectly relaxed. If you've got questions or comments, then please put them in the chat, write them in your own language, and we'll translate them so everybody can see them. So now we've got 15 minutes with Nyasa and Steph, and they're going to present to us resources under the Regional Prevention Programme, as well as UHC and DRM programs. And I think that will speak very much to how we can use these resources and keep moving forward beyond pitch. So over to both of you. I think, Nyasa, you're starting us.
Yes, Joe, thanks. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Everyone is, so across the spread. Hi, everyone. My name is Nyasha Chimbore. I am Programs Lead at the AIDS and Rights Alliance for Southern Africa. And ARASA was a Africa regional partner for the pitch program from about 2018, of course, to 2020. And I think this presentation, we just want to run you through very quickly some of the resources that were developed under the different areas of work that ARASA was engaged in. A lot of these resources have a very specific Africa focus, but some of them certainly can be adapted across the regions. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief background. So ARASA is a regional partnership. We're established in 2002. We have about 100 partners across about 18 countries in Eastern Southern Africa. Many of those partners were partners under the Pitch program, but through the work of coordinating some of the work that we did with Pitch, we also met some really fabulous partners that were not ARASA partners as well and worked with them. But this graph here just kind of shows the areas that ARASA worked on. We worked on regional HIV prevention, with a specific focus on structural barriers in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, on budget advocacy and domestic resource mobilization in Kenya, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe, and universal health coverage in Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. Next slide. And so, like I said, I'm just going to very quickly run us through some amazing resources that were developed under this program. You can just click, Ellen, thank you. So under the HIV prevention program, I wanted to talk about these really amazing briefs that we developed around addressing structural barriers to HIV. And the main purpose of these briefs is to explain to activists what the 5 pillars under kind of the UNAIDS programming are, and why they're important to advocacy. So these are really great resources for community activists to get to understand the 5 pillars and kind of get to understand the structural barriers as they relate to, you know, the specific groups. So there's one on adolescent girls and young women, one on key populations, one on voluntary male circumcision, and kind of talks about, you know, how those, what are the structural barriers to those programs, etc. So these are really great resources for community activists to really understand how our work fits into these 5 pillars. Next slide. The next ones that I wanted to also talk about activist guides that we developed, these specifically last year. The first one is talking about shadow reporting for HIV activists, how to do that, why to do that, why it's useful, how to make it effective, etc. The second one is an advocacy guide to the 2030 targets. So it explains what the 2030 targets are, what, you know, where we need to be putting our efforts around monitoring to be able to input and ensure that we're actually working towards the targets. And the final one is one that we really enjoyed putting together, which is kind of an activist guide on epidemiology. So, you know, tries to translate all the scientific speak that we often use into language that, you know, we all understand, into really language that we can use in a way that really connects with the communities that we're working with. As Lois said, you know, what does this all mean for the rural woman on the ground, for the young girl who's potentially a survivor of child marriages, etc. So this is a really nice guide that explains some of these really key HIV epidemiology concepts for community activists. Next slide. In addition to kind of the written resources that we did, we also created some animations. So the one on the left is an animation video that we did on ending HIV as a public health threat by 2020. And we did this last year, and where we were was really thinking about, we are in 2020, we have missed a lot of the 2020 targets that have been reached at regional level, particularly in Africa. And so now what kind of needs to happen to move towards the 2030 targets? So these animations are available for you to use in your trainings or in your kind of staff meetings, but they're really great resources to just understand advocacy towards the 2030 targets. We also had some webinars last year, which we recorded and remain available for people to be able to listen to again, and just listen to some of the ideas. So a lot of these webinars, we had community activists that would come and share experiences on some of the strategies that they're using at community level. This one around the 2030 targets had interesting speakers like a creative who spoke about how to do creative advocacy. And we know that last year being a time of COVID, this was very important around using, social media, technology, etc., in a creative way. So these are some of the resources under the HIV prevention program. I'm going to move on to the UHC program. Next slide. Universal health coverage. I think the resource that I wanted to highlight the most here is a resource that was actually led by AIDS Funds, but which we, from the Africa regional perspective, were able to help and input into and coordinate conversations with partners within the Africa region. So this guide is a really great, useful guide and very easy to use guide. And the purpose of this guide was really, it kind of contextualized the fact that we were in the context of COVID, and then asked the questions, okay, how do we ensure that the gains that we've made for HIV are not lost? And how do we actually use this current context that we're in as a catalyst for UHC advocacy? The first part of this guide is really just the basics, who, where, how. So really explains what is UHC, the terminology, and gives that kind of basic context around universal health coverage, places UHC in there and says, okay, what does COVID-19 have to do with UHC advocacy? The second part of this provides some advocacy tools, some really practical advocacy tools at country that can be used at country level. And then the third part of this just provides kind of links to further UHC advocacy resources. This, I think, is really one of the great UHC resources that is out there at the moment, and one which I strongly encourage, all partners to have a look at. Because it's really a practical guide, and it's really a very easy to use guide on universal health coverage. Next slide. And then I think the project which we had the most fun and the most stress doing last year was the budget advocacy project and domestic resource mobilization project for, and this project in the Africa region was done in Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria. And then it was also done, and Steph, you will correct me, it was also done in Myanmar. And so under this project, we developed some really good resources, country level resources for the different countries which this project worked in. For the Africa region, we worked with LVCT Kenya, with SAFAIDS, and with Education as a Vaccine in Nigeria. And we worked with some really amazing consultants who are experts in health financing to put together resources. And what we did was started off with doing a situational analysis in each of the 4 countries that we worked in, to really understand what was going on in terms of health financing, particularly for key populations in those countries. We then also documented some case studies on budget advocacy. So what has been successful in terms of budget advocacy in the past, and asked those questions. What has made budget advocacy, domestic resource mobilization advocacy a success in particular contexts? What can we learn from previous advocacy initiatives that have been taken up by CSO, civil society organizations? And this wasn't necessarily just, thank you so much, Lucas. It's actually Indonesia, not Myanmar. And this was This included not just case studies from organizations that were for vulnerable and marginalized communities, but other kind of case studies just generally around domestic resource mobilization, and ask the questions, what lessons can we learn from this? We also were able to develop some policy briefs for activists to go forward with. So even though pitches ended, there will continue to be opportunities for us to advocate and to do domestic resource mobilization advocacy. So we developed some policy briefs that kind of identified what were the key advocacy issues that were identified by the partners that we were working in at country level. And then the most kind of daunting task that we undertook was developing a curriculum on HIV health financing and budget advocacy in the 4 different countries that we worked in. Next slide, please. These are kind of
Nyasha, sorry, just to warn you, we've 5 minutes.
Right, okay. So these are some of the topics that are covered in the curriculum that we developed. The curriculum, like I said, are very country specific, but they're quite generic based on the World Health Organization e-learning course on health financing. So I won't go into those topics. Next slide, please. And then there's a specific section around budget advocacy. Next slide, please. In addition to those curricula that we developed in the different countries, we also have an animation, a really good one. And this is one of the resources that actually can be used for, can be adapted for other regions. And we also did a webinar with some really great speakers on the continent around budget advocacy and domestic resource mobilization. I'm just going to turn it over to Steph to take us through the last slides.
Great. Thank you so much, Nyasha, and hello, everybody. To those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Stephanie Finlayson, and I worked quite closely with Nyasha and Arasa on the domestic resource mobilization work that she said was amazing and slightly stressful. But I worked for Frontline AIDS towards the end with the pitch team. But we were pretty pleased with the outcomes of that work. I just have a couple more resources to mention. We worked with Accountability International, and they developed one of the first resources that we refer to as the mini country briefs. And so these mini country briefs were developed at the end of an accountability literacy and scorecard training that Accountability International facilitated in all 9 of the pitch focus countries. And the discussion was really looking at UHC and health financing. So the mini briefs are really like a 2-page brief looking at country challenges and opportunities and really providing potential advocacy entry points. There's also supporting validated data to sort of help shape and start next questions for advocates. Next slide, please. Also with Accountability International, they developed a resource that we like to refer to as the more in-depth HIV health financing country briefs. And these were developed specifically for Kenya, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. And these in-depth country briefs are really using the scorecard methodology that Accountability International has become quite well known for. And the data for these country briefs are driven from a larger Africa-focused HIV health financing scorecard research that Accountability International did. And so some of the data that they're looking at, some of the big picture topics are really looking through HIV health financing through different lenses, such as, what is the global funding? What is public-private partnerships? What is philanthropy? Civil society and CCMs, and a few other topics. Next slide, please. So really having a look now at all of these resources that have been developed under the pitch program, I thought maybe we could highlight a few ways in which HIV health financing and budget advocacy could be used by partners in their advocacy work. What really are some of the next steps that advocates can take to push for better resources for key and marginalized populations? So really the first point there is, the overarching goal of the budget advocacy, which is really looking to increase the share of the overall budget and prioritize programs within the health budget for key affected populations and marginalized groups. And, a few ways that we can do this are, to become active and learn how the decision-making system works and how to participate in policy and budget development and enactment. And, here really thinking back to the tools that Nyasha was just discussing with the HIV health financing and budget advocacy curriculum. Some of the tools in there really are able to break down and identify different points in the budget cycle. So I would encourage you, the Kenya curriculum specifically breaks down this cycle and really identifies clear entry points for engagement. The second point is really looking to improve efficiency of the resources that are already available. And this is, a really crucial point right now. We know that the fiscal space is squeezed, especially now with COVID. So looking for ways to improve and maximize on resources that are already available is really key. The third point is looking to improve transparency and accountability. And one example in the mini country brief that we were just talking about for Kenya was looking at things like the CCM budget. Kenya has a large budget, but their performance assessment is not very good. So here, it was identified that this is a potential entry point for local advocates where they could interrogate how the budget is being spent and what it is actually being allocated to. And the last point, and it's really not the last point because I'm sure there's many more, but this was just to highlight a few in this discussion, were to look to raise issues around public spending and health, engage and work with the media and other community groups and activists. And as Lois so neatly outlined at the beginning of this webinar today, Pitch has done some really amazing work here, working with community groups. So here, really looking on how we can use the resources to help support our domestic resource mobilization and budget advocacy work. Next slide, please. So the last slide is really just looking at ways that we can use these tools.
Sorry, Steph, I'll just have to, sorry to interrupt just briefly. For the Portuguese interpreters, the Portuguese participants are having trouble hearing you speaking in Portuguese. Can you please move closer to the microphone and then we can carry on? Sorry about that, Steph, please continue.
No worries. Okay, sorry, my apologies. So on this last slide, we're looking at a few ways that maybe we can use these tools in the future. And the first way is really looking at the country package of tools and resources, especially in Indonesia, Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria, where we have the situational analysis and policy briefs, curriculums, as well as the Accountability International focused country briefs. So here we have packages of tools that countries can sort of pick up and go with. Another way of sort of using these, using some of these tools in the future is to continue with the budget advocacy trainings that happened under Pitch. Also for training opportunities, I think it might be a good place to mention that the UHC toolkit that Nyasha was discussing earlier also has the potential for, there's a lot of training potential with that toolkit as well. The third point is really looking at advocacy opportunities to continue to support. During some of the domestic resource mobilization and budget advocacy trainings, there were advocacy strategies that were developed or were in sort of the beginning stages of development. So looking for ways in the future to continue to help support those strategies would certainly be something that we could all work towards. And then the last point is really looking at adapting the tools and resources. So there are so many tools and resources here, and finding ways to use and adapt these tools in the future and in different countries would be very positive. Great, and that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Steph. Thanks, Nyasha. Excellent. Really wonderful to see what a massive number of resources there are, particularly like those animations. And I think the briefs designed for community activists. There's a question around what languages we're translating them into. So I think rather than answer that now, we can just put that into the chat. I know we have already committed to translate them into a number of languages, but we can perhaps just write which ones they are. And if there's a lot of demand, we can think again about whether there are options to extend that. But I want to, thank you for your such enthusiasm. And as I was saying, this is the beginning, and we can see that in terms of the resources available, and we'll make sure this recording is available, the presentation that you've given is available, and also that it's easy to access everything. So thank you both again. We're, for people who are joining, it's a great time to be part of the webinar. We're taking questions in the chat as we go. Write them in your own language and we'll interpret them, we translate them. And now we have videos on, microphones on. We have Casey from Frontline AIDS. I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment, Casey, but Casey is going to inspire us by sharing what the key outcomes are that have emerged from the end-term evaluation. So you're very welcome, Casey, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Great, thanks, Joe. I hope you can all hear me okay. We've got some slides coming up, so that's a positive start. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening again. So as Joe mentioned, some of you may know me already. I work for Frontline AIDS in the UK, and I've been working to coordinate the pitch reporting and M&E process since about September 8, 2018. So today I'll be taking some of your time to really look back at the results of the pitch end-term evaluation that was carried out last year in 2020, as well as the kind of key conclusions and recommendations that came out from the evaluation, and also starting to look at some of the next steps, what happens after this evaluation process. So next slide, please. Great. So the first thing I wanted to look at really is taking a step back. What did we actually set out to learn with the evaluation? What was our objective? So next slide. So we had two objectives. The first was to really better understand the contribution of pitch to the most important outcomes and examples of impact throughout the program since 2016, as well as the sustainability of these changes, all within the context of the original pitch theory of change that you can see on the screen here, and the original anticipated outcomes that we hoped to achieve with the program. So some of the questions that we asked the evaluation team to ask partners and stakeholders was, which strategies were most effective for you? Have partners felt that their advocacy capacities have changed or improved over the period? What role did gender play in pitch? And also what didn't work so well for you as a program? Next slide, please. And then the second objective was very much about understanding the extent to which, this commitment to collaboration and partnership building and movement building has really worked out well for the program partners and for colleagues we've worked with. So we asked the evaluation team again to, reach out to different stakeholders and ask, timely questions about the health of the partnerships between country partners, but also how country partners have worked with regional program partners like ARASA and with the global policy partners. And we also wanted to find out a bit more about the extent to which collaboration really happened effectively, with the Dutch embassies in each pitch country as well, and with other Ministry of Foreign Affairs funded programs. Next slide, please. So on to the results and findings then. So we wanted to better understand the extent to which pitch had achieved the change that we wanted to achieve in line with these outcomes. And so outcome harvesting was used as the main method for collecting and analysing data that would help us understand the change that pitch had contributed to. So the next slide, please. And so during the evaluation, as I think Lois mentioned earlier, a total of 123 outcomes were harvested by the evaluation team, and that's across all 9 countries, 2 regions, and at the global policy level. And these were harvested or discussed during a series of online and in-person reflection meetings with partner staff and country focal points and others. The target originally was trying to harvest about 8 outcomes per country, so representing each key population, as well as adolescent girls and young women, and then 4 at each regional program level, and then 8 at the global policy level. And you can see from this slide here, from this pie chart, that in the majority of countries, these targets were achieved, while in some countries, partners contributed many more outcomes beyond that target. And I think that really speaks to, you know, the amount of really valuable work and the number of really valuable examples of impact and results that partners were really keen to share and to discuss. Now, these outcomes represent observable, significant changes that we've contributed to as a program. And it's good to remember that these are the outcomes that partners discussed in the evaluation, but they're not necessarily intended to represent everything that we contributed to as a program. That would have been not really feasible within the scope of the evaluation. So next slide, please. So then the other key method that was used in the evaluation was the creation of a series of stories of change. 9 stories of change were developed in collaboration between the evaluation consultants, country focal points, and the partners. And the topics that were selected were agreed upon by the country partners through that discussion. And each story of change was developed on the basis of a single harvested outcome, and then built upon gradually through interviews and through back and forth discussion between the consultants and relevant partners, and again, the country focal points. Now, these stories of change present the richness of the journeys, you know, the process that pitch country partners have been on, exploring both the progress and the setbacks that they experienced along the way, and the lessons that they identified through that experience as well. So you can see here in this slide the range of topics that were covered in these stories of change, from the recognition of transgender women and women who use drugs as a distinct key population, communities in Mozambique and Ukraine, right through to achieving more equal access to medical services and treatment in Myanmar and Uganda. So next slide, please. So one of the interesting aspects of the evaluation was the opportunity we had to learn about which stakeholders were influenced the most during pitch. So as you'll see here in this pie chart, the majority of outcomes relate to changes in the behavior and the practice of national governments, then followed by local government departments, and then followed by intergovernmental organizations, whether that's a UN agency or perhaps, you know, another international organization. And then less than a quarter of the outcomes really relate to changes in the practice of civil society organizations, networks, and the media, etc. And I think it's clear from this that pitch partners have had a really strong focus and a high level of success in contributing to a more enabling environment by influencing changes in policy and practice, mostly at the national level, but also at this local level. Next slide, please. So of the 123 outcomes, as again Lois mentioned earlier, 117 were considered to be either expected or unexpected positive outcomes, while only 6 were considered to be unexpected negative outcomes. And in terms of negative outcomes, we really meant this was where a change in the stakeholders' behavior potentially undermined progress towards the pitch goals. And these outcomes were categorized as positive or negative by the partners themselves during those reflection meetings. So looking at these 117 outcomes, we can see that 62 outcomes, or about 53%, relate to either changes in the law, a step towards a change in the law, new government policies or strategies being introduced, or the actual implementation of these new policies and strategies in practice, as well as changes in budget allocations for key populations and adolescent girls and young women. So again, from the perspective of the valuation, this feels very encouraging. We can see that the work of pitch partners really has had an impact on the policy-making landscape across the countries where pitch has been active. Next slide, please. Great. And so here are just some examples of the outcomes. And as I mentioned before, there are over 100 outcomes in a database. We've made these available as an annex to the evaluation report, which is available on the Frontline AIDS website. So I'd encourage you to go there after this this webinar and read more for yourself. But these are just a very small number of examples of what were harvested. So in terms of changes in the law, one key change that was documented was about the law on prevention and combat of premature unions, so child marriages in Mozambique in July 2019. The new law criminalized child marriage, and it won't necessarily end the practice immediately, but I think with continued advocacy efforts, this will really help to bring about changes on the ground. So a really important breakthrough. In Nigeria, we saw a really important breakthrough around the age of consent and, enhanced sort of relationships really with civil society and with National Agency for Control of AIDS. We saw really significant increases in funding by the Global Fund in countries like Kenya and Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the implementation of new policies, so we saw the rollout of government harm reduction programs in places like Uganda and the implementation of voluntary drug treatment in care in Vietnam. In terms of changes in practice and social norms, we saw a really positive change in Uganda, where 66 health clinics were reported as setting aside dedicated days for young people, where health workers have been proven to be more friendly and inclusive and non-judgmental. Next slide, please. And so what activities, what strategies have pitch partners actually carried out in order to actually achieve these really impressive outcomes and changes? So during the evaluation, partners were asked to describe the contribution that they made towards each outcome. And the data presented here shows this wide variety of those interventions. So the findings showed nearly a third of the contributions were through lobbying and meeting with stakeholders. So that's 32%. Other contributions were around capacity building, networking and collaboration, the provision of technical assistance, and so on. And so again, a really rich and diverse range of strategies, although understandably a big focus there on direct lobbying and direct engagement with stakeholders. Next slide, please. Great. And then obviously, understanding the extent to which pitch partners' advocacy capacities have changed as well was a really important component of the program. So of the evaluation, sorry. So in the evaluation, the team were really keen to understand, how partners have benefited from increased collaboration, the increased use of evidence to support their advocacy positioning, and so on and so forth. So we found that all partners have started to plan their advocacy activities far more strategically, and this has really helped to increase the effectiveness of their advocacy, to increase the number of breakthroughs they see. The use of advocacy asks has really enabled partners to think more deeply and again strategically about what they want to achieve, helping them with their advocacy planning, but also with their reporting and their learning. Really importantly, advocating collectively has proven to be one of the most effective approaches because it's enabling partners to achieve those important results, sharing skills and knowledge and insight between them. And then a variety of partners also reported that developing strategies together helped to result in stronger advocacy efforts. So again, a really sort of a big focus here on the importance of collaboration, whilst also seeing that good quality evidence has also contributed to the success of advocacy. And I've included just two really nice quotes here. So the first from a pitch partner in Nigeria, who noted during the evaluation that we fight as a family, helping each other wherever and whenever, which I think is a really strong, really powerful message, I think, that really speaks to that underlying sort of commitment and yeah, passion for collaboration and partnership across the program. And then another nice comment from the Pitch CFP in Indonesia. You know, Pitch makes us strong by putting us, the different key populations, together in one advocacy program. You know, recognizing shared interest and mutual concern, you know, irrespective of whether you work on behalf of sex workers or the LGBT community. Next slide, please. And so there were a series of recommendations that came out of the evaluation, but we focused here on those that relate specifically to Pitch partners, because I'm aware that we have a number of colleagues from partners in the webinar today. So one of the first recommendations then was about increasing collaboration and coordination with similar programs at different levels, so country, region, and global. And that could be through the formation of coalitions. So again, I think whilst there was a real observation that partners had really stepped up to the challenge of, you know, working more collaboratively with organizations that perhaps they didn't have experience of working with, there's still room for sort of further development and sort of perhaps consolidation of some of these partnerships, you know, through more formal agreements. Again, there was an interest from the evaluation team to recommend that we increase collaboration between partners through the development of joint advocacy agendas or through joint activities. And I think actually we started to see a lot more of this both in 2019 and 2020. So this is very much about building on some of the main achievements that we saw in the last years of the program. And then, you know, a couple more points really about the need to sort of diversify the forms of evidence that partners are able to gather, you know, when monitoring the results of their work. Now, we know that collecting reliable data to support a claim of contribution to a policy change is notoriously difficult and challenging. And we have tried, I think, through the Pitch program to work together really between frontline AIDS funds and partners to work out the most effective ways of doing this. So I think really this is just a signpost to flag, you know, let's keep thinking through this about, you know, what evidence is available to us, what really is feasible to call evidence. So I think next slide, please, Olin.
And Casey, we're coming to the last few minutes.
That's fine. This is my last slide. Thanks, Joe. So what are the next steps then? So, you know, obviously, you know, I think as a program, although the program has come to an end, as Lois mentioned earlier, this does not mean the end to our advocacy, whether we are sort of developing advocacy plans in Brighton or Kampala or Yangon or wherever we might be. So this advocacy, we hope, will live on. You know, partners now have the skills and the knowledge and the confidence to continue to drive forward their advocacy and campaigning work as part of the ongoing HIV response. But we wanted to kind of flag just a couple of sort of key points that we're aware of here at Frontline AIDS. So obviously in 2021 and beyond, you know, we're going to be seeing ongoing advocacy with UNAIDS and the Global Fund on really, you know, ensuring that they commit, you know, both financially and politically to HIV prevention measures. The Empowered for Change project has recently been approved, and so Frontline AIDS will be working with partners in Kenya and Uganda with adolescent girls and young women on a new advocacy project there, which is going to be really exciting to see come to fruition. We'll also be looking to capitalise on new opportunities to advocate for and champion comprehensive sexuality education, again, working with partners in different settings. Obviously, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to make its presence felt globally, we'll be working to promote a people's vaccine for COVID-19 whilst sustaining the HIV response. We'll also be working to sort of continue ongoing advocacy in support of community-based harm reduction. And I think from my own perspective, from an M&E perspective, we will also be looking to, in fact, we have recently, very recently launched a new publication called Measuring Up, Learning from Practice, which is all about capturing the key reflections and lessons from the experience of Pitch and previous community advocacy programs around what works and what doesn't work so well when it comes to, as I was saying before, you know, measuring, collecting data, around one's contribution to change in complex policy environments. So I'd urge you to visit the website to download a copy of that in English, and then translations in the pitch languages will be made available very soon, and we'll let you know about that. So I think that was all from my side. So really looking forward to kind of discussion, questions later in this webinar if we have time. If anyone has ideas and reflections around how in a very practical way we can take forward the evaluation results, it would be great to hear more thoughts. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Casey. Both impressive in terms of the range of outcomes. I think particularly, you know, to see so many at national level changes in law, and then those shifts in budget allocation, which are so important, but also then seeing how, as organizations, as partners, how we've all got better at advocacy, and this collective advocacy, which we all know is so important to creating ongoing long-term change. But also impressive in your presentation of the evaluation. We really appreciate how clear you made that. Thank you. We've got to keep moving because we've 25 minutes or so, so time, as always, is a little against us. We now have Lola to join us, and just remind everybody that if you've just joined, please do write your questions in your own language in the chat. We're gathering them up. We'll answer as many as we can. But first, we're going to listen to you, Lola, for about 5 minutes.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, I'll be quick. Thanks. I know it would be great to have time for some questions as well. So hi, I'm Lola. I've worked on the pitch program for coming up to maybe 2 years, and I think one of the key things that we have done with pitch is really kind of capture a large number of stories, and have developed a number of case studies around kind of key stories of change and key moments of advocacy. And what I've kind of heard, you know, from colleagues that is really important for us is to kind of continue our connections as we go forward. Next slide, please, Owen. And you can click again, Dave, sorry. Thank you. So what we have is the pitch closeout page. Now we've always had like a pitch program page, but what we've done is now put everything in one place. It is literally a one-stop shop for links to pitch. I'm hoping this is going to work, that I can actually share my screen with everybody. So let's see whether I can do this. Hopefully, can a colleague tell me whether they can see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, 2 seconds. Hopefully you can't see the picture.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, so this is the pitch closeout page, as we call it. It's really easy to get to. It's literally frontlineaids.org/pitch. And what we have is kind of an overview of why we carried out the program, and our key results with a link to the end of term or the end term evaluation report. And you'll see that kind of when you visit the page that there are links to various other parts of the website. We can link through to resources, and we link through to case studies, and also link out to some of our global partners as well. It's an overview of the people that we've supported, the communities we've supported, key populations and adolescent girls and young women. We have a photo gallery as well. And also then our global themes, which I think kind of, you know, we haven't talked very much about gender, but we have a number of gender transformative approach tools. And we also, as Nyasha and Steph have spoken about, tools on universal health coverage, and also domestic resource mobilization. Again, we haven't really talked about the resources we have about the UPR process and how partners have engaged in that. But again, if you go into the website, you'll click through to a number of resources there. And we've also kind of got the article. So I'm really hoping this is all going to work. I should have tested it beforehand. But if you click through, we have a number of articles and resources about pitch, stories that we've developed and generated over years of the program. And I really hope and encourage partners to kind of take a look and come back to these resources time and time again. Let me just go back. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. Hopefully this is all very seamless. Olin, can we go back to the presentation, or should I go back to the presentation? Okay, great, thank you. Next slide, please, Olin. A few other pictures might come up. These are just screenshots. And I've talked briefly about the kind of the case stories we have. So one of the things that we were really keen to do within the comms working group was to pull together some kind of key case studies that weren't necessarily going to be repeated in the evaluation report. And so we had a few resources that came out last year, and now we have another 3 resources on the website. If you could click again, please, Olin. We have a case study about global fund transition in Ukraine. We have another case study on Nigerian partners who stepped in to reduce the onus on judges to dole out harsh sentencing laws. And we have another case study from Indonesia on their campaign and their advocacy to ensure adequate ARV provision for people living with HIV. And those resources are all now available on the website. Next slide, please. And some of you may not be aware, but we've also had community-led research. So the research papers would have come through in every single pitch, come through in the pitch newsletters. But we have all of those research summaries on our website now, and they're really kind of, they're excellent, and please take a look at them. They've been developed by partners to support community advocacy for improved HIV care and human rights through national and global processes. We have them from a range of countries, and again, just encourage partners to continue visiting the website to kind of get access to all of these resources. Again, one of the themes that has kind of come through is that we want to continue the program and just keep it alive, keep it flowing, keep it going, keep connecting. And I'm hoping that some of the things that we've developed will certainly help us to do that. Next slide, please, Owen. So Anton from Ukraine, who is the controfocal person from in Ukraine, alluded to this in the chat. So it's the same home, but we've changed the name. So the Pitch Partners Facebook page is now called the Global HIV Advocacy Partnership. It was a name that was generated by partners. Anton and Lloyd have both stepped forward to agree to be co-administrators of the page going forward. And what we want partners to do is still see this as a home to share your advocacy. I think, one thing that we can all do in terms of kind of collaborating and sharing information is to put our advocacy successes, our learnings, our challenges into the Facebook page. It will continue working along the same lines. It will be private. It's membership only, and that just secures and ensures the privacy of partners within that space. And even if you are now linked to other programs, other advocacy programs, I would really encourage partners going forward to still use this as a space that we can continue connecting with one another. I think the Pitch family and the Pitch legacy is strong and deep, and hopefully these tools will enable us to maintain those connections. Next slide, please, Olin.
One final minute, Lola.
Oh, 1 minute. Okay, so I'll be really quick with this sharing. So we've talked a lot about kind of, about the outcomes that have been harvested. And one of the things that we were really keen to do within the Pitch team at Frontline A's was to ensure that the Pitch legacy was never lost, and actually that it became just part of what we do as community advocacy partners, what we are, and the learnings that we can share. So this new community advocacy page, which launches today, I'm going to really try and do this super fast. Bear with me, Joe. Can partners see my screen? No, maybe not. Can you see my screen now? Hopefully, Olin, can you let me know if it's come through? Okay, so this is a new community advocacy page, and you'll see that it will include, and does include, success stories from Pitch partners. So you'll see here about the story about global fund transition in Ukraine. and then also a story about kind of Uganda's first opioid treatment clinic. And as we scroll through, there'll be other stories from Vietnam, and then peppered within this are not just stories from Pitch, but a lot of them are. So you'll see here there is a story about India decriminalizing homosexuality. And although that happened a few years ago now, it's really important that we still capture that and ensure that people realize the power and the value of community advocacy. And then we have more recent stories, again, from Ukraine and the advocacy from people, women who use drugs to gain parental rights. I really encourage everyone to kind of visit the page. We'll have new community advocacy stories included in there as time goes on. And I really hope that this is an opportunity for us to, again, celebrate everything that Pitch has delivered and will continue, the legacy of it will continue for a very long time. So those are just some of the communication resources that we've pulled together and finalized. Any questions, please put them in the chat, but yeah, I hope you found that useful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll stop
Thanks,
sharing now.
Thank you very much, Lola. The stories are super powerful, so do take time to go through them after the webinar. And really, it's trying to, we've got all these resources, that they're your resources, you've developed them, they're everybody's, they're our common good. So, and they're our stored energy. They are the legacy of Pitch. So please keep coming back and using them. We've only 15 minutes or so left, so we're going to run a quick panel. On the panel, we have Lois, Nyasha, Steph, Casey, Lola, and Lucas. And I've been gathering questions as we go along. So let me read out there are, I think, 3 real questions I've identified so far. I think if we could also just take a moment, maybe Nyasha, to share the website that you mentioned where your resources are. We could just actually show that whilst we're in this panel. But the first question came from Ukraine, from Elios, which was around what are there examples of good practices with religious organizations. Then there was a question from Joanne around examples of, or a question around the impact of activities impact of outcomes on domestic resource obtained. And actually, I think then there's a follow-up question from Joanne where he was asking about that slide I think you showed, Casey, around the fact there are increased investments in Vietnam, Myanmar, Ukraine in terms of harm reduction. Was that additional funding coming in, or was that reallocation of existing resources, if you know that? So those are the starting questions. Anybody fancy having a go at answering one of them?
A couple of those relate to the evaluation, so I'm happy to have a first go. So I think the first question was around outcomes that related to religious organizations, I guess from the perspective of influencing attitudes and norms and practice. So in summary, yes, there were. I've actually, not surprisingly, not memorized all 120 yet, but I have got the evaluation report open in front of me, and I've just done a keyword search. And yeah, I think there were. I think there was one from Ukraine. And I believe there was also one in relation to Papua in Indonesia, in relation to engagement with, I think, with Christian community leaders and work there to try to promote more progressive, more inclusive sort of attitudes towards, I believe it was the LGBT community there. But I don't want to guess, because yeah, that's not really right. I think the best thing I could probably do is to signpost people to the evaluation report itself, and do dive in. And we've also made the annexes available as well, which actually show the whole list of outcomes that have been harvested. So it's a bit of a read, but if you do a keyword search, then you can find what you're looking for fairly easily. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Casey.
And then, Joe, do you want to remind me, sorry, of the other one or two questions that related to
the other ones were, I think, from Joanne, around what outcomes have you collected on domestic resources obtained?
So I think, yeah, so let's have a look back at the slide. So I think there was a slide where we looked at, so yeah, we captioned within kind of, new budget allocations. So I think there were 13 outcomes that were harvested that related to budget allocations. I think from memory, it was, again, at a guess, probably about half that were relevant to new international funding opportunities. So funding allocated by PEPFAR or the Global Fund or others. And then others were more relevant to, agreements at the national level to release domestic funding. So as I said really before, I think at a guess, we're probably looking at between maybe 7 and 8 outcomes that were related to, say, domestic resource mobilization. But I think it's also probably worth bearing in mind that given that DRM and budget advocacy was a relatively new area of work that received that real focus, in the final year of the program, I think we're likely to see a great deal more outcomes, I would think, actually coming out in 2021. I think a lot of hard work was kind of invested and put into securing more domestic funding for the HIV response. But yeah, let's keep an eye out for more outcomes as they reveal themselves this year and into next year even.
And there was one other, what was your, speaking on behalf of the panel, Casey, there was one quite precise question back to one of the slides around the increased investment in Vietnam, Myanmar, and Ukraine in terms of harm reduction. And the question there, was that new money or was it reallocated money?
So I believe it was new money. But again, my apologies. I think we'd have to go back into that key annex to really sort of dig out the detail. But from memory of reading those, I believe it was new money.
We have from Vietnam, Jung Nguyen from SCDI actually has put in the chat, in terms of harm reduction in Vietnam, 100% cost for methadone. We have from national budget, ARV, the social health insurance, harm reduction products. So I think that's actually a broader point.
I think as well, if we have partners representing those countries here today in the webinar who could speak to those points, do feel free to unmute and share your reflections, because of course, hopefully we'll have people in this room today who were part of that harvesting exercise last year. So they would undoubtedly be better positioned to comment on these details.
Thank you, thanks, Casey. It's a great invitation. So, Anton or Yuan, if you'd like to unmute and say a few words, we'd be delighted to hear from you.
Yeah. Actually, I wrote in chat. Just the 2 points.
Meanwhile, maybe.
Sorry, yeah, I'm changing my channel.
Not wanting to put people under pressure. Anton, I see it. Thank you, Anton.
Now it's okay. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, Anton, we can hear you in the English channel.
Because I think it's because of the channels, or maybe English. The English is okay. Now everyone is. Do you hear me,
Anton?
Yeah, Anton, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So there are two sides of this question, 2 points, because as a part of our transition and budget advocacy around this, we reached the increase of state budget funding for prevention programs for key populations, including harm reduction programs, but I mean like needle and syringe programs and other, from 77 million Ukrainian hryvnias in 2019 to 207 million Ukrainian hryvnias in 2020, which is like from 3 to 9 million US dollars in equivalent approximately. And talking about the substitution therapy, yes, we also have, so from 2017, governments started to fund procurement of methadone and buprenorphine. Now they are covering the all number of clients. But from 2020, as a result of additional advocacy, there were increased and organized specific funding to cover the medical support as a specific service. So not just the procurement of medications, but also coverage of additional coverage of let's say salaries or additional payments to salaries of medical personnel who's involved in the service provision on opioid substitution therapy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Very impressive, Anton. Thank you. So I'm sorry to say it's going to be, we don't have more questions, and actually we're coming close to the end of our time. So it's going to be a short but sweet panel where Casey has spoken on behalf of everyone. But what we do have is thank you particularly, Casey, for that. We do have, as we move right to the end now, we have our video on community advocacy. So I think Olin will show that. Sit back, everybody, and relax and watch this.
Yeah, and Joe, just let me know if there's no sound coming through and I'll start the video now.
Not hearing any sound yet. Okay, we hear sound. Thank you.
We are
seen as regime changers.
We are seen as saboteurs.
As a troublemaker.
As impatient.
Sebagai ancaman.
As dissidents.
As vague. As others. I really am.
I'm a woman who uses drugs and also a mother living with HIV.
I'm a feminist, a human rights activist.
I'm a father living with HIV.
I am a Muslim. I am a daughter, and I am a human rights defender.
I am a gay man who wants to break down the walls of marginalization.
It's challenging, and I feel stigmatized.
Can be frustrating and unsafe.
It's like a tunnel without end.
Menantang dan menakutkan. We can enable the transgender people to voice out their existence and rights.
We can prevent people from being sent to prison for who they love.
Give people who use drugs equal rights.
We can create safe spaces for sex workers.
Quyền của người nam quan hệ tình dục đồng giới và người bán dâm được bảo vệ. Stop coerced sterilization among women living with HIV.
We can ensure adolescent girls and young women get the healthcare that they need.
We are leaders.
We are visionary.
We are partners.
We are allies.
Kami temanmu.
The protagonists of a better future.
And we are here.
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 Talk to us.
Talk to us.
I am an advocate.
I am an advocate.
Wow, we are here and we are regime changers, and I think that's our destiny. So to finish, I'd like to just remind everybody, whilst all good things come to an end, today is the first day of our new relationship. And so I encourage all of you to continue working within your partnership, our partnership, which is what Frontline AIDS is. It's an open partnership for everybody who's committed to ending AIDS and who believes that every person has an equal set of human rights. We will be to all of you, encouraging you to stay within Frontline AIDS. As I say, it's our partnership, it's your partnership. And that means that you will be able to keep sharing with us all the new resources we create together over the coming years. You'll be able to join all the webinars that we will run over the coming years, because webinars are here to stay. And we will also be sharing a regular update around the partnership of what people are doing. So please let's stick together, let's work together. And so then it really just falls to me to thank, first of all, Lois, Nyasha, Steph, and Casey, and Lola. And of course, our silent friend Lucas, who's been overseeing the whole program. And we also want to thank our wonderful interpreters. Thank you so much for making this available to everyone. But I'd like us to really take a moment to thank everybody on the call, our partners. When we see the video, it reminds us, you've inspired us over the last 5 years. You've inspired us with your courage, with your commitment, and with your belief there can be a better world.